Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk, exploring the issues affecting all of our lives. I'm your host, Austin Harris. Newsflash, Cayman is an expensive place to live and call home. Since 2019, housing and utilities have led the consumer price index increase above all other metrics. And while there was a cooling off in 2020 as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, rental prices specifically are once again on the rise. In 2019, prices soared by 20%. In 2021, they increased by a further 5%. And by the second quarter of 2022, a further 6.9%, representing an overall nearly 32% increase in rental prices in the Cayman Islands in just 2 years. With me in studio to help us better understand what may be driving these increases, it is my pleasure to welcome local real estate and wealth management professional, Mr. Spencer Merren. Mr. Merren, thank you so much for being our guest here on Let's Talk.
And thank you to Austin for having me.
Absolute pleasure.
It's a pleasure for me as well.
Indeed. Well, maybe we can begin by telling our audiences in particular a little bit about Spencer Merren, your background, and specifically your professional background in real estate.
Well, I started in doing real estate for around 20 years. I've been doing it. I actually got qualified in 2008. I was working for Cayman Real Estate Company until about 2014, and then they folded. So I started my own company called Wealth and Lifestyle Properties International Cayman Limited in 2015, and I've been involved with that company ever since. I'm also involved in developments as well, and as well as sales. And that's basically what I do now as a profession, is basically real estate. That's all I do at this point in time. Yeah.
I see, indeed. Well, let's talk real estate, in particular their impact on rental prices. In the local news, in an article, I think it was the 8th of January, an article appeared that predicted that whilst the cost of rental accommodations are already soaring, over the course of the next 12 months, they're expected to get even higher. If I can just quote the article which appeared in the Cayman News Service, Michael Joseph from Property Cayman, and a veteran real estate agent, has said that the property market over the next 12 months, with the current environment of high inflation and increasing interest rates, will make it more difficult for people to borrow to buy a home, which will increase the competition for rentals. Would you agree with these sentiments?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. The problem is with inflation, there's no quick fix for inflation. Mm-hmm. That part of it is always going to be there. The partner with interest rates, you got to understand with interest rates, they play a lot bigger part than I think people realize. Mm-hmm. The average probably mortgage for a person is about $2,000 a month.
Right.
If they're paying 7% interest on that, and the interest rates increase to 8%, that's a 15% increase. Mm-hmm. So their payments are going to go from $2,000 to about $2,400 a month. Right. It doesn't take a huge increase in interest rates to have a significant increase in what somebody pays in terms of a mortgage. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people are now realizing that. I've had a lot of my friends saying that, gosh, I say the interest rates have just gone up 0.5%, but my mortgage payments have now gone up by $300-400. Yeah. I say that's just the way it is. It doesn't sound like much, but in dollar wise it is. Mm-hmm. And I mean, now people are basically maxed out as it is, and if you get another increase, it just puts an additional strain.
Yeah.
And then it also, in terms of people qualifying, it moves people out of the qualification range as well.
Mm-hmm. But haven't real estate prices always been artificially high, regardless of what the Federal Reserve has done? I mean, if you look at the 7 Mile Beach corridor, for example, it's long been prohibitive from Caymanians, either at a ownership standpoint and I dare say at the rental standpoint. I mean, I don't find many Caymanians renting on 7 Mile Beach. What are your thoughts?
I don't think the Fed has too much to do with 7 Mile Beach. Where the Fed has is to do with the interest rates, which affects the medium level Caymanian and the poorer Caymanians. The biggest problem that we have here, Austin, is that I think you got like you got you got the lower level, the mid level, and the upper level. The upper level isn't affected in terms of real estate ownership because most of the people, say, just take for instance 7 Mile Beach. 7 Mile Beach, and most of those sales are cash sales. They're not from borrowings. I mean, the amount of wealth in 7 Mile Beach is staggering. I mean, you got one, just for example, you got one condominium complex that has 6 billionaires in it. That just gives you an example. Those people don't borrow money to buy things, you understand? Where the biggest issue is here is the middle level. And that's what affects, if the feds go up, the banks here basically follow suit. Because they say that a lot of their borrowings has to come from overseas. Their funds that come from overseas, so they got to pay the interest, the overseas interest. That their cost is basically affected by the feds. So where our biggest issue, I think, is in the middle level, and that's where the biggest concern is here. The lower level Caymanians at this point in time will never be able to afford a home, as far as I'm concerned. If it keeps going the way it is, they can't. It's impossible. It's the middle level you got to concentrate on.
Yes, indeed.
So,
again, going back to some of the reasons and what's driving the increase in rental prices, it's been argued by some that the high number of real estate agents in the Cayman Islands are part of the problem. Would you agree with this sentiment, or perhaps would you agree that perhaps the high number of real estate agents are more a sign of the symptoms rather than the cause of high rental prices?
the real estate agents aren't a cause of the prices going up. The thing is with in real estate, a real estate agent is going to try to maximize his return, whatever. If somebody comes to him and says, "I got a property for sale or for rent," and they ask for, what his suggested price. Normally, any real estate agent will give them probably the maximum price because that's just the way they're in the business to make money as well. It's very few real estate agents that I think that has that amount of clout and pull that would affect the price of a property. I think the price of property is basically set by the owners, the people who sell it. And whenever I get in a situation like that, I usually refer them to a valuator. I think the valuators have more effect on the prices than the real estate agents, to be honest with you. I think there are too many real estate agents in Cayman, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think we need. I think it's over 260, 270 real estate agents in Cayman. I don't think we need that amount of real estate agents in Cayman. With regards to the amount of sales that are there. I mean, I have friends that have been in the business 20 odd years that are struggling.
Right.
So that just gives you an example.
Sure, indeed. Again, drawing from some of the suggestions that are coming from the local community on this discussion of the high rental prices, and of course, high cost in Cayman in general, some have also suggested that there should be a tax on the local real estate industry, perhaps, to offset the high costs. More revenue coming into government, more opportunities for government to do more, and hopefully that means benefiting the consumer. Do you believe we should be taxing the real estate industry?
When you say taxing, you mean other than the transfer tax? Or?
Other than the transfer tax. I suspect they're talking about a tax on yearly or annual sales. No. A sales tax, if you will.
When you get into that area, that creates another set of issues. It could benefit in certain areas, but it could also be detrimental in others. My feeling is that you should have specific areas. My personal feeling is that areas like 7 Mile Beach, instead of you having a 7.5% transfer tax, and you increase the transfer tax on a one-off basis, maybe you go up to even 12%. In other areas, then you reduce the taxes for the Caymanians. And I think there should be certain areas of Cayman that are designated for Caymanians only, to be sold to Caymanians only. Now, you got to be careful with that as well. But it's one of the things I'm not sure. I heard that there's some rumblings that the government may be looking at something like that, and I'm not 100% sure.
Right.
And it's either a designated area or a designated development could be specified for sale to Cayman zone, so foreign people wouldn't be able to buy into those. But I think the taxes, you could actually start with the planning zones, and then within those planning zones, you may be able to correct to incorporate small, I guess we call housing zone or economic zone for housing. And then you go from there and you say, well, this area is 12% tax, this area is 10%,
Right.
this area is 5, 1, whatever. And I think commercial properties should actually be taxed more than residential because people get a return on commercial properties. So,
But when we look at taxes or fees, again, the traditional process from merchants has always been to pass on these increases to the consumer. So
Yeah.
isn't it possible that any increase in tax or fees will have the reverse effect and actually lead to even higher prices, whether it be on the real estate for sale side or certainly trickle down to the rental side?
yeah, it's possible that could happen. Yeah. I mean, it is, like I said, the people, we got like two different types, to me, two different types of economies here. You got the people, the very rich, and then you got below that. Even the very rich are feeling a bit of a pinch, to be honest with you, but most of them are not affected. So there are certain policies that will work in one segment, but it will not work in the other. And so that's what you got to be careful with.
All right.
Yeah.
In its recent annual report, Sariba, which is the Cayman Islands Real Estate Brokers Association, registered a total of 877 properties sold between January and December 2022, amounting to US $992 plus million in some sense, of course. This is the second highest sales on record in the real estate sector, shy, of course, 2021's milestone, where we recorded, I think, $1 billion in real estate transactions. Without a doubt, it's gold rush time in the real estate sector. Perhaps this might be one of the reasons why we see so many real estate professionals coming up out of the woodwork, because obviously it's an industry and opportunity where there's opportunity to make money. But this also represents a lot of revenue for the Cayman Islands and or the Cayman Islands government. However, some in the community are suggesting that there should be a ban on foreign real estate ownership. I wonder what your thoughts are on this suggestion, again, against the backdrop of sales in the region of 900 plus million, $1 billion, and perhaps even more in the future.
You got to be careful with that as well. You can't completely ban foreign ownership. Let's go back to what I said before. I think you should have designated areas like 7 Mile Beach. You could never ban foreign ownership of 7 Mile Beach. I think that'd be a step in the wrong direction, to be honest with you, because the majority of people on 7 Mile Beach are foreign owners, and maybe Rum Point, 7 Mile Beach, those two areas. You could. Why I would like to see is just certain areas of Cayman that foreign people can't. It's just designated for local, basically local purchases. You'd have to take in basically study that fairly carefully to see where you'd want it done and what the actual results of it would be. If you're taking large chunks out of for foreign ownership, then the development could decrease as well. And development is basically what fuels a lot of the economy at certain points. So you're not just going to look at it today, you got to look at it 10, 15, 20 years from now, what the results are going to be.
Yeah.
And you take into consideration people like Dart who owns large chunks of property. If you take that, at some point in time, they will be developed or should be developed. But the thing is, when you have foreign ownership that owns large parcels of land like that, and it sits there for years and years and years, without being developed or without being resold, then it definitely affects the market.
Sure it does. Sure.
So that
it
that's
impacts the overall stock availability
Yeah.
of properties.
Yeah. So and I think the government needs to consider putting a cap on any amount of land anybody can own, Caymanians or foreign, because it's not a Caymanian thing. It's a national thing. It's for your country.
Yes.
And I think the government needs to consider putting a cap on the amount of property any one individual can own. I mean, there's a lot of people that would argue against it, and there's some reasons why they would, and I understand that. But most of those people that argue against it are just looking at the possibility of the money side of it,
Right.
not the economic side, and what it's going to do for the Caymanians and their culture and everything else.
Yes.
And that's what you got to take into consideration, is that, you know, the availability of property
Right.
to Caymanians.
I want to pick up on something you just said. It's not a Caymanian thing, but I dare say it's a global thing. Cayman is not in a unique position as it relates to the issue of rising rents or even real estate prices. In fact, it is something that we're experiencing across the globe. To prove this point, an article recently published in the Washington Post said that not only are rent prices rising, they are rising tremendously fast and are happening virtually everywhere. According to national rent estimates, prices jumped over 14% in the first half of 2021. Of course, this is using the US model, more than doubling the rate of inflation and more than tripling the typical rent growth in the several years preceding the pandemic. Today, 87 of the nation's 100 largest cities have fully rebounded to pre-pandemic rent prices, with cities such as New York and Miami posting increases of between 30 and 40%, according to real estate firm Redfin. Now, they listed three predominant reasons why these prices, particularly rental prices, are on the increase. And I wonder if we can compare the reasons listed in the United States as to whether or not these reasons may in fact be relevant here in the Cayman Islands. The first reason is that there are more and more households competing for homes than ever before. Would you agree with this point, that there are more buyers on the market today looking for property, whether it be homes to purchase or, in the absence of homes, rental properties, somewhere to live?
Yeah, there's more prospective buyers, whether these people can actually qualify to get those. But there's definitely more people looking for homes.
Right.
The problem that you have now is inflation is basically the biggest thing. You got the maintenance cost on is gone up probably about 30% over the last 2 or 3 years on people's units. The construction cost has gone up from about $150 to $175 per square foot to about $225 to $250 a square foot today. This over the last 3 or 4 years. And if you're in the newer units that are being built, the interest cost affects them more than the units that are basically older units that are not affected by the bank.
Yeah.
So a person develops it, and then the interest rate, then the rents are going to, the cost of those things are going to go up in terms of rental. In terms of the homes, I really don't. I'll give an example. Is that people? I don't think people, Caymanians in particular, really understand or just starting to understand the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it needs to. People either got to understand that to get a house, they got to move from where they are economically. They got to move up to that if they're going to eventually purchase a home.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're getting to the point now where there's a lot of the younger Caymanians that get more educated. So then you'll get more of them as they go along, looking for apartments and looking for homes. Mm-hmm. In that term, and then the ownership is really getting to be prohibitive. I mean, a 2-bedroom house now is $500,000.
Yes.
Very few Caymanians can afford $500,000.
Yes.
And you're looking at a 10% deposit and a 10% transfer, so you're looking at another $100,000 before you can even look at buying a house.
My question is, do you qualify for that kind of lending? And that's
Yeah.
another challenge. When we
Yeah.
talk about more people are looking for homes, whether real estate or rental, I wonder if you know whether that increase in home buyers or renters, whether that be local or foreign. The reason I ask this because under the previous administration, certain legislative changes were made to require greater, greater presence. We're requiring companies, foreign companies in particular, to have greater presence in the Cayman Islands. You know, gone are the days where foreign company could register a PO box number. You have a management company to run your
Yeah.
affairs. But now, again, in an effort to stay off the gray list, companies are required to have a greater physical presence. A greater physical presence means staff, means individuals who also are either renters or looking to buy a home. When we talk about the increase in buyers or renters on the market, are they being increased by foreign nationals, some of these companies perhaps moving to the Cayman Islands, or are they more so younger Caymanians, getting out of school, getting out of university, getting a start on life, and of course they want to start with a piece of the rock?
That part of it, Austin, I really don't know what a mix is in terms of,
Right.
of that in terms, but I know with the people that are hired by these companies more, they can afford a home over a Caymanian at this point in time. The younger Caymanians I know are trying to get into, there's a lot of younger Caymanians that now are trying to get into at least buying apartments. And but I really don't know what the mix is in terms of who buys what, in terms of home sales.
Right.
It seems like it's pretty mixed according to what with my conversations with people and developers and stuff. It seems fairly mixed.
Yeah.
A lot of the homes now can only be bought by people who are either a couple. It has to have two incomes now to buy a home. So it's either couples or people who are connected to each other, spouses, whatever.
Yeah.
A single Caymanian now is very, very difficult. As, younger single Caymanian
Yes.
to do it. I don't, like I say, I'm not sure what the mix is in terms of.
That's fine. Something, just a thought, and perhaps it's something worth looking into and trying to see what impact certain legislative changes, because the whole topic of avoiding the grey list is once again back on the table, and the OECD and others keep moving the goalpost on us. But it's important to note when we talk about what's driving these prices. We talk about population growth, which I want to ask you about. But there are other factors, perhaps outside of the real estate industry, that are driving this demand, and we're trying to, nail it down. Industry experts also cite the rise in inflation as being one of the reasons also driving the rental increases. I think we agree that is certainly part of it.
Yeah, definitely. No, there's another issue. If to provide, just say, affordable homes for the middle level. Of course, you got lower density, mid density, and high density. Okay, just for arguments, to provide affordable homes, you're basically need a high density property. Now, I checked the prices of high density property, and most of those high density properties are over $1 million per acre. That makes it prohibitive for affordable homes.
Yes.
Unless you go at least 7 stories high, and then you would have to change the planning laws. So it's things that can be done to help kind of soften the impact. But whoever the departments and the government and everybody has to sit down and take a fairly holistic view of the entire situation. If you change the planning laws, it can help a bit.
Sure.
But you gotta, then it goes back to whether certain of those areas that are in high density, if you can actually go 7 stories, then there are other restrictions to that as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I sat down, I mean, I do numbers for people all the time, and it's,
Right.
you need 7 stories at $1 million for it to even come close to being feasible to put affordable housing there for Caymanians.
Right. 2 questions there. First of all, the question of building heights is
Yeah.
again also on the table for discussion. And there's a debate about how high is too high. You got some politicians saying, we need to go as high as 100 stories, skyscrapers across the capital, Georgetown, and perhaps along 7 Mile Beach. Others saying no, that's far too high. What is your opinion? Do you have an opinion on perhaps how high we should go in the Cayman Islands?
The thing is, I'm an older Caymanian.
Yeah.
I say older, not that old, but I would prefer to keep it as low as possible. But I understand now that it's not going to be possible.
Mm-hmm.
Continue on the track that we're going. There was a discussion or whatever thrown out that a couple of years ago that we should be at 100,000 people in Cayman.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, that's not possible. To be at 100,000 with just housing alone plus the other infrastructure costs. So you're going to have to, at some point in time, you're going to have to go up.
Yeah.
In certain areas. You're going to have to, either that or you're going to have to create smaller cities or smaller towns, like one out in East End, North Side, Bodden Town.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, so, just create maybe 3 other major areas, like the Savannah, Bodden Town area, or the North Side area and the East End area.
Yes.
And then you could spread things out more.
Mm-hmm.
At this point in time, that would be but then that takes a lot of wherewithal and a lot of capital, which the government has no control over.
Right.
And is all left to independent developers to do that, which may never happen.
Mm-hmm.
At least not. It's not going to happen right now. We all know that. But that's the only other solution, and that's not a feasible solution at this point in time.
In terms of new developments for rental properties specifically, but also real estate properties, and sticking with building heights, should we be? And I think you agree with this sentiment, but I want to be sure when we think about building new developments, instead of going horizontally, building a new home or a new rental property, 1 or 2 stories, should we be looking at building buildings going vertically? As we see, particularly along the new Georgetown capital, where we've got, maybe merchant stores on the ground floor, coffee shops, restaurants, and then, from floors 3 to whatever, residential units for living spaces. Should we be looking at that as a means of future development, which will also save in terms of the amount of space, but maximize in terms of the number of units that persons can have as a dwelling place?
Yeah, I definitely think that when you look at the new development downtown 1,
Yes.
that's the same concept.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're going to see more of those.
Right. Indeed.
Yeah, I think you'll see more of those. There's not much left on 7 Mile Beach to build on. You could, unless you tear what's down there and redevelop it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what's going to happen. Is a lot of that stuff in 7 Mile Beach is going to be redeveloped. So that could be another thing to look at.
Well, certainly with the whole beach erosion conversation, we might be, having the discussion about, changing the setbacks, but that's a discussion for another day.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Finally, on another issue that I think is worthy of consideration when we look at an increase in demand for either real estate or rental properties, and that is population growth. According to the latest census, the population has grown, I think, by an average of about 29%. Cayman's population stands at 71,432 people, representing a growth of about 29% since 2010. Now, whilst population growth generally signals good things for the economy in terms of GDP and otherwise, I think you mentioned earlier on that our population expansion has not, well, our infrastructure expansion has not kept up with
yeah.
our population expansion. Should we be looking at either A, reducing the growth rate of people, or B, expediting our necessary infrastructure to deal with this anticipated and somewhat unavoidable population growth?
Well, the thing is, right, you got two ways. The population growth, the thing is, that's driven out sometimes by development as well. I mean, right now you got a major hotel being built. I think it's two more major hotels on the drawing board, and a lot of other larger developments. You got another development on Red Bay that's, I think, is 100 acres. Those type of things. You're gonna need people to do those if they actually go through. I think we don't really seem to have a proper development plan at this point in time. The only thing that I can see is that you have to pace the development to go in, to put that infrastructure into place to bring it up to support the population is a very expensive venture. Mm-hmm. Somebody has to pay for that as well.
Yes. Yes.
So you're basically in terms of economics, it's not going to get that much better.
Right.
In terms of economically, it's not going to get that much better. The infrastructure to reduce now, it's difficult for you to reduce the population and continue with development. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things that you could do, I think there's, it may or may not have that much of effect, but I think there's a lot of, in terms of the government's policy with regards to work, mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of people in Cayman that really don't need to be here. Mm. And I think that work, and I know they have a lot of things to deal with, but if there was, then, in other words, I'll just give you one example.
Sure.
I know this gentleman, he opened a construction company, knew nothing about construction. He opened a maintenance company, he knew nothing about maintenance. He opened a cleaning company, he knew nothing about cleaning companies, and he's hiring people with these companies without basically work. Mm-hmm. I mean, now, if you go to work and say, I need a construction worker, you should say, well, where's the contract? So you got to show that you need, whether it's construction, whether it's maintenance, whether it's cleaning, you have to show that you particularly need these people. Mm. You know.
Yes.
And,
but it's not strange.
But that's just on the lower level.
Right.
Now, on the upper level, it's a different situation again.
Right.
You know.
But it's not strange for a developer, a businessman, to open businesses that he or she may know nothing about, but he goes out and hires managers, supervisors, and staff that have some experience in this regard.
Exactly.
And that, of course, also lends itself to the employment conversation. Yeah. The more businesses that are established, the more potential for employment, and therefore the demand on government should be reduced. So it's kind of a double-edged sword argument. On the one hand, we have more businesses but no employees for it now, but perhaps in the short term that may change and therefore render the unemployment picture a bit less bleak than it may be now.
Yeah, but then these people got to stay somewhere.
Right.
That's the problem.
Right.
I mean, when you look back at the 29%, that's about what, 16,000 people. Mm-hmm. That's 16,000 beds you're looking at. That's a lot of beds.
Sure it is.
Even if you look at people's you're looking at 5,000 units. Mm-hmm. Three per room. It's 5,000 units.
Yes. Yes. Infrastructure simply has not been able to keep pace with that population growth.
No, I mean, there's no easy answers here.
No,
absolutely no easy answers.
But what is important here, and I think what I want the audiences to derive from the conversation, is that there is also no one reason why we're seeing an increase in rental prices, an increase in real estate prices. There are, in fact, a number of factors that are worthy of consideration. But I think you have nailed at least one area where the government needs to expedite its plans, and that is, of course, in terms of the planning rules.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this as a community for a number of years, certainly the last 2 years. We need to look at our planning laws, our planning regulations. Where do we see ourselves going in the next 10, 15, 20, 50 years? And how are we going to ensure that our infrastructure is capable of, of matching our otherwise growth goals and ambitions? Interesting enough, in its economic and financial forecast for 2022 and 2024, the Cayman Islands government revealed that operating revenues over this period, from 2022 to 2024, that operating revenues over this period will continue to be driven by the strong performances in the financial services sector, the local real estate market, as well as the newly revived tourism industry. As such, it is unlikely that we will see much government intervention in terms of government involving itself in reducing rental prices, because quite obviously they're depending on the revenue generated from that sector to balance the books. So again, it's no simple solutions, but these are some of the challenges behind it. I wonder what your thoughts are on that point in your closing remarks.
The government can only do so much. People, anytime things go wrong, they blame the government. The government does have, can have an impact on things. Now, what you just said to me, the government's looking at one point from a financial side, that their thing is financial.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you get to the point, you're collecting the money, the government's revenue depends on all of these factors. Okay. Now, when you get to the point where it's so exasperated that it becomes a social issue, that people are starting to protest, that they don't have a place, they don't this, they don't that, that's when your problems are going to start. Mm. So you got to get to the point where you say, well, look, we have to kind of start tightening the reins on this, bringing things a little bit more to the center, because if you don't, if it goes too far to the right, you're going to have another set of issues.
Yes.
Other than economic issues.
Indeed.
Because economic issues, when you look at the whole world, social issues and economic issues are tied together.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's the biggest concern that I have, is that the Caymanians coming up now or they either become part of the state, the state's going to have to be supporting them, mm-hmm. or they're going to start protesting the conditions that they're going to start living in. Caymanians are not used to this situation. That's the problem. Mm-hmm. Now, quickly, in terms of going kind of regressing a little bit, one of the things that I wanted to bring up, in terms of assisting young Caymanians, if somebody buys a property, I think one of the ways that the government could help is that in 10 years, if that person moves from, just say, 1 bedroom to 2 bedroom in 10 years, the equity that they accumulate in that is non-taxable. Mm-hmm. And then they do it for another 10 years. The equity in that is non-taxable in terms of the transfer. Mm-hmm. And that would ease the Caymanian situation, and they could move up as the families increase.
Fair enough.
That could be.
Sure.
That could be.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic idea, and certainly lends itself to the whole notion that certainly government's actions, particularly from the Caymanian standpoint, to encourage growth, encourage purchases, encourage ownership of the piece of the rock, as you will, has been to reduce or not remove the taxes relevant to first-time Caymanian homeowners, etc. Now the conversation has lent itself to the point was, okay, so we've got first-time Caymanian homeowners, but life changes, life moves on. What about Caymanians who already own a home, but they want to move, they want a second home? Maybe they've gone through a divorce. They've had to lose that home. They got to start over again. So, to your point, I think your recommendations certainly make a lot of sense. But Spencer, I want to thank you for joining us. Obviously, this conversation, because of all of the various moving parts, I think we are able to determine that there's not just one reason why rental prices are in fact increasing, but there are a number of reasons, and they are all worthy of consideration. But I want to thank you very much for being our guest.
And thank you too. Thank you, Austin. It was a pleasure.
Indeed. Certainly for us, And for our audiences, we thank you too for tuning in, and we hope you've enjoyed today's episode as much as we have. If you did, remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And please feel free to leave any comments you may have. Tune in every Sunday at 2 p.m. for another episode of Let's Talk, exploring the issues affecting all of our lives. I'm your host, Austin Harris. Until next time.